Hello, my dear listeners. Before we begin today's story, I'd like to send a warm hug to three very special listeners. Esther Bautista from the Philippines, Nancy Howlett from Krabi, Thailand, and James Bossard from Virginia, USA. It's amazing to see how far our stories are reaching, and having you here brings me so much joy. And what about you? Have you told me where you're listening from? Leave a comment. I read every message with great care, and who knows, maybe your name will be featured in the next video too. Now then, let's begin today's story. The windshield exploded into a constellation of shattered glass. Clara felt the impact before she could process the sound, metal screeching, tires screaming against the wet asphalt, the world tumbling in agonizing slow motion. Then came the pain. Sharp, searing, stealing the air from her lungs. "Jason?" Her voice was weak, desperate. She tried to turn her head, but every movement was liquid fire in her chest. Through blurred vision, she saw her boyfriend in the driver's seat, a small trickle of blood running from his forehead. He was conscious. He was physically fine. "Jason, I can't move." But when his eyes met hers, Clara saw something that chilled her more than the shock of the accident. Irritation. As if the crash were an inconvenience. As if she were an inconvenience. 20 minutes earlier, they had been arguing in the car, the same argument they had been having for months. Clara had asked Jason to meet her parents, just a simple dinner. "Why do you always pressure me?" Jason had exploded, accelerating dangerously in the rain. "I said I'm not ready. Why can't you just accept that?" Clara felt tears burning her eyes. 3 years together. 3 years of waiting to be introduced, to be seen, to be chosen. "I just want to know if you see a future with me. Clara, for heaven's sake." He took his hands off the wheel for a second to gesticulate, frustrated. That was all it took. The car hydroplaned on the wet curve. Jason tried to correct, but it was too late. The utility pole seemed to leap out of the darkness. Sirens tore through the night. Paramedics appeared like angels in fluorescent uniforms. Clara heard urgent voices, felt careful hands moving her. Each touch sent a fresh spike of agony through her ribs. "Thoracic trauma, possible lung perforation," someone shouted urgently. "We need to move her now." Through the fog of pain, Clara searched for Jason. Where was he? Why wasn't he holding her hand? Then she saw him, already out of the car, being examined by another paramedic. He had a superficial cut on his forehead, nothing more. And he was talking on his phone? "Yeah, Mom, I'm fine. Just a stupid accident." He didn't look at Clara once as she was carefully secured onto the stretcher. Not when she whispered his name. Not when the ambulance doors closed, whisking her away into the rainy night. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights and hurried voices. Clara was floating somewhere between consciousness and darkness. "Perforation in the left lung," a firm, urgent male voice stated. "We need to operate now or we lose her." Gentle hands touched her face. "Clara, can you hear me? My name is Dr. Perrington. I'm going to take care of you, I promise." She tried to focus on the face above her, intense green eyes, an expression of absolute concentration. There was something about that gaze that made her feel, for the first time in hours, that she might just be okay. "Jason," she mumbled before the darkness finally won. "Is he here? Is he—" "Shh," the soft voice replied. "Don't think about that now. Just breathe. I will take care of you." And as Clara slid into unconsciousness, the last thing she registered was that voice. Solid, comforting, like an anchor in the midst of a storm. The first thing Clara registered was pain. Not the acute, shocking pain of the accident, but a dull, persistent ache that pulsed with every shallow breath. The second thing was a crushing solitude. Even before opening her eyes, she knew she was utterly alone. The hospital room was sterile, silent, save for the rhythmic beep, beep, beep of the cardiac monitor. When her eyelids finally lifted, heavy as lead, she saw white walls, an empty vase on the side table, and pale morning light filtering through the window. No flowers, no card, No Jason sitting in the chair, waiting for her to wake up. The emptiness squeezed her chest tighter than the surgical drains. A nurse entered, a professional smile etched on her face. "Ah, you're awake. How are you feeling?" Clara tried to speak, but her throat was raw from the breathing tube. The nurse, her badge read Margaret, gently offered her water. "You're very lucky, dear. Lung perforation, 3 fractured ribs, mild concussion. But Dr. Parrington is the best cardiothoracic surgeon we have. He saved your life." Clara swallowed the water painfully. How long was I out?" 2 days. Surgery was Friday morning. Today is Sunday." 2 days. Clara felt a fresh wave of tears sting her eyes. 2 days, and Jason hadn't appeared once. Did anyone ask about me?" Margaret hesitated, a shadow of pity crossing her face. "Your friend Sophie called a few times. She'll be visiting later." "But Jason?" The silence was the answer. The door opened again, and Clara saw the man who saved her life in the daylight for the first time. Dr. Thomas Parrington was younger than she expected, perhaps 30, with dark brown hair slightly disheveled, as if he had just rushed from surgery. But it was his eyes that captured her. Intense green, carrying a focused kindness that made something in her aching chest contract in a different way. "Clara." His voice was exactly as she remembered, solid, reassuring. He approached the bed, checking her monitor with practiced efficiency, but his gaze kept returning to her face. "How are you feeling? Be honest." "Like a truck hit me," Clara tried to joke, but the voice came out weak. Thomas didn't smile. Instead, he pulled up a chair and sat down, a simple action that meant everything. Doctors don't sit. They check charts and leave, but he stayed. "You were very lucky, Clara. A few minutes more and—" He stopped, his jaw tightening. "But you're here, and you will make a full recovery." Clara looked at his hands, surgeon's hands, strong and secure, hands that had literally held her beating heart. "The man who was with me in the accident," she finally asked, hating the tremor in her voice. "Jason. Did he ask about me?" The silence that followed was deafening. Thomas looked directly into her eyes, and Clara saw something there, contained anger, disbelief. He was discharged the same night. Superficial injuries. A pause. There has been no visit or call from him since. The words were clinical, professional, but there was an underlying current of something more. Protection, indignation on her behalf. Clara felt the tears finally spill over. 3 years. 3 years, loving a man who left her bleeding in a hospital without looking back. Thomas reached out, offering a tissue, his other hand resting lightly on hers. Just for a second, but long enough for Clara to feel warmth, solidity, presence. "Clara," he said softly, waiting until she met his gaze. "You deserve someone better than this." And in those simple words, something inside Clara, something that had been broken long before the accident, began, minutely and painfully, to heal. "You need to get out of that bed." Thomas's voice was firm, yet gentle on Monday morning. Clara had spent the last 3 days curled up, staring at the white ceiling, counting every crack, every stain, anything to avoid thinking about the absolute silence of the phone on the bedside table. 0 texts, 0 calls from Jason. As if 3 years could be erased in an accident, in a decision to simply not show up. "I don't feel like it," she mumbled. Thomas approached, and for the first time, there was something akin to impatience in his green eyes. "Clara, look at me." When she reluctantly obeyed, he continued, "You can stay here drowning in self-pity over a man who doesn't deserve your thoughts. Or you can start healing, body and mind. Your choice." 15 minutes later, Clara was in a wheelchair being pushed by Thomas through the hospital's sterile corridors. Every movement still hurt. Her ribs protested, the drains pulled uncomfortably. But the simple act of leaving that suffocating room already made her feel more alive. Where are we going? You'll see. Thomas wheeled her to an elevator, then up to the very top floor. When the doors opened, Clara gasped. It was the hospital courtyard, a hidden rooftop garden she never knew existed. There were potted trees, colorful flowers, wooden benches, and sunlight. Real, warm, golden sunlight touching her skin for the first time in days. Thomas positioned her under a tree where the filtered light created dancing patterns. 15 minutes, he said, checking his watch. Natural vitamin D doctor's orders. But he didn't leave. Instead, he sat on the bench beside her. For a long moment, they simply existed in the silence. The distant hum of the city below, the chirping of birds, the whisper of the wind in the leaves. Then Clara spoke, her voice small. I think I always knew that he didn't really love me, but it was easier to pretend than to admit I was wasting my life on someone who would never choose me. Thomas turned his body to face her. Why did you stay? Clara laughed, a bitter, joyless sound. Because I thought that was all I deserved, because my self-worth was so shattered that crumbs felt like a feast. She wiped away a stray tear. Pathetic, isn't it? No, Thomas said with an intensity that made her look at him. It's not pathetic. It's human. But Clara... He hesitated, as if carefully weighing his next words. You saved people's lives through your architectural projects. Sophie told me about the children's hospital you helped design, about how you thought of every detail so sick children would feel safe. You are brilliant, talented, kind, and any man who doesn't see that is an absolute fool. Clara's breath hitched, not from pain, but from something entirely different. The way Thomas looked at her was not with pity. It was with respect, admiration. She couldn't name it, but it made something deep inside her stir. How do you know about my work? Thomas smiled, a small, almost shy smile, completely different from the confident surgeon. I may have looked you up after the surgery. I wanted to know more about the woman whose life I was saving. He stood up, checking his watch again. Your 15 minutes are up. I can't have my patient getting sunstroke. But as he began to push the chair back, his hand lightly brushed her shoulder, a touch so brief it could have been accidental, but the warmth lingered long after. And for the first time since the accident, Clara wasn't thinking about Jason. She was thinking about green eyes and words that sounded like promises. You deserve someone better. Put this on. Thomas appeared in Clara's room on Friday evening, holding a gift box. She was sitting up in bed, finally free of the chest drains, moving with less pain, but still confined to the hospital for a few more days of observation. What is it? She opened the box and found a dress, simple, sky blue, and soft. Nothing extravagant, but infinitely better than the hospital gown she had been wearing for a week. Thomas, I can't. You can, and you will, he interrupted with that tone that brooked no argument. I have a surprise for you. 7 o'clock. Get dressed. He left before she could protest, leaving her holding the dress and feeling something dangerous bloom in her chest. Hope. At 7 sharp, Thomas returned. Clara had managed to dress herself, a small but significant triumph, and had even applied a little makeup that Sophie had brought. When Thomas saw her, he stopped dead in the doorway. His eyes swept over her face, the dress, and returned to her eyes. You look beautiful. The words were simple, honest, without flourish, and they made Clara blush in a way she hadn't in years. He offered his arm. Ready? This time, Clara walked, slowly, holding his arm for support. But she walked. Every step was a victory. Thomas guided her back to the elevator, but this time they went even higher. When the doors opened on the top floor, Clara gasped. The hospital terrace was completely transformed. Fairy lights were strung up, creating an artificial starry sky. A small table was set with a white cloth, candles, and 2 chairs. There was even soft music playing from a small speaker. It was Romantic. Completely, unequivocally romantic. Thomas, Clara could barely speak. What is all this? He guided her gently to the chair, ensuring she was comfortably seated before sitting down opposite her. You spent a week locked in a hospital room, abandoned by someone who didn't deserve you. I thought you deserved at least one good night. He uncovered the dishes, not hospital food, but real food from a nearby Italian restaurant. I hope you like lasagna. Clara felt tears burning. No one had ever done anything like this for her. Not in 3 years with Jason. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Thomas put down his fork, his gaze fixed on her with an intensity that made the air between them feel electrified. Because from the moment I saw you on that stretcher, bleeding, scared, whispering the name of a man who didn't have the decency to show up, something in me broke. He leaned forward. I'm a doctor, Clara. I see patients every day. I save lives every week. But you... He shook his head, as if grappling with the words. You haunt me. The way you fight to recover. The way you can still smile despite everything. The way your eyes light up when you talk about architecture. He extended his hand across the table, stopping inches from hers. Not touching, but almost. Clara, I know it's early. I know you're still healing. But I need you to know, you are not invisible. Not to me. The silence that followed was charged with 1,000 unspoken things. Clara looked at his hand, so close, so tempting. If she moved just an inch, they would be touching. But before she could decide, the sharp beep of his pager shattered the moment. Thomas cursed under his breath, checking the message. Emergency. I need to... Go, Clara said, surprised by the firmness in her voice. Go save lives. Thomas hesitated, then stood up. He leaned down and kissed the top of her head, a gesture so tender it made her heart soar. This isn't over, Clara. This conversation. This... whatever this is between us. And then he was gone, leaving her alone under the fairy lights, her heart beating a frantic rhythm, knowing that something fundamental had just changed. To help pass the time, Thomas appeared in Clara's room on Monday morning with a sketchbook and a set of professional pencils. Clara was sitting in the chair by the window, stronger each day, but still restless with boredom. I'll be in surgery most of the day. But I know you're an architect. So... He placed the materials in her hands. Draw, design, dream. Their fingers brushed when she took the notebook, and both felt the familiar jolt of electricity. Thomas, Draw your dreams, Clara, he whispered, and there was something almost vulnerable in his voice. I want to know your dreams. He left before she could answer, leaving her holding possibilities in the form of blank paper. Clara spent the day drawing. At first it was just doodles, arches, windows, architectural details. But then something shifted. She began to sketch a house. Not just any house. The house. The house she had always dreamed of but never dared to admit she wanted. Clean, white facade. Large windows that let natural light flood every room. A front door painted sky blue. And a garden. Oh, the garden. Full of roses of every color. She added a porch where she could drink coffee in the mornings. A bay window in what would be the master bedroom. A small studio with perfect lighting where she could work. The house took shape under her hands, every line a manifestation of a dream she didn't even know she still held. When she finished, the sun was setting, and there were tears on her cheeks. May I see? Thomas's voice made her jump. She hadn't heard him enter. When she turned, he was leaning against the doorframe, still in surgical scrubs, his hair messy, exhaustion evident in his eyes. But when he looked at her, at the notebook in her lap, that tiredness dissolved into something softer. Clara hesitated, then turned the notebook toward him. Thomas approached slowly, as if afraid to startle her. When he saw the drawing, he stopped. He simply stopped and looked. For so long that Clara began to feel nervous. It's silly, I know, just A fantasy. It's perfect. Thomas's voice was rough. He took the notebook with reverent care, tracing the details with his fingers. Clara, this isn't just a house. It's a home. He looked up at her, and there was something in his eyes that stole her breath. The rose bushes. You drew rose bushes. My mother loved roses, Clara whispered, surprised by her own honesty. She died when I was 16, and ever since I always thought, if I ever had a real home, it would have a garden full of them. For her. Thomas knelt in front of her chair, still holding the drawing, now at eye level. Tell me about her. And Clara told him. For the first time in years, she opened up that painful, beautiful part of herself. She spoke about the mother who taught her to dream big, the mother who encouraged her to study architecture, the mother who said Clara could be anything. Thomas listened to everything, not just listening, but absorbing every word as if it were precious. When she finished, silent tears were streaming down her face. Thomas reached out, gently wiping them away with his thumb. She would be so proud of you. And then he did something that stole all the air from Clara's lungs. He took the drawing and said, "Can I keep this? I promise I'll take good care of it." "Why?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. Thomas smiled, that small, devastating smile that made her heart falter. "Because now I know your dreams, and I want to remember them." He stood up, carefully tucking the drawing away. "Rest, Clara. Tomorrow we start real physical therapy." But that night, alone in the dark, Clara found herself thinking not about physical therapy, but about the way Thomas looked at her drawing, as if it were more than paper, as if it were a promise. "5 more steps, Clara. You can do it." The physical therapist Andrea stood ahead of her, encouraging but firm. Clara was between the parallel bars, trembling from the effort, sweat running down her forehead. 2 weeks into recovery, and she still needed support to walk more than a few feet. It was humiliating. It was frustrating. It was impossible, she gasped, her leg muscles screaming. "I can't." "You can." Thomas's voice came from behind her, where he was observing the session between surgeries. "Clara, look at me." When she reluctantly turned her head, he continued, "You survived an accident that could have killed you. You survived having your heart broken. 5 steps are nothing to you." There was a challenge in his voice, and she had always been terrible at resisting challenges. Clara gritted her teeth and took another step, then another. Her arms trembled, holding the bars. Her ribs protested, but she kept going. 4 steps, 5, 6. She was pushing beyond what was asked, driven by something more than determination. She was driven by the way Thomas looked at her, as if she were capable of anything. "Now let go," Andrea suddenly said. Clara froze. "What? No, I'll fall." "You won't," Thomas said, and suddenly he was beside her, but not touching. "I'm here. I won't let you fall, but you need to try alone, Clara. Just 3 steps. For me. For me." Those 2 words changed everything. Clara let go of the bars. For a terrifying second she swayed, certain she was about to collapse. But then her muscles remembered. 1 step, hesitant, wobbly, but alone. 2 steps, firmer now. 3 steps, and suddenly she was laughing, tears streaming because she was walking, truly walking without support for the first time since the accident. "I did it!" She turned to Thomas, euphoria exploding in her chest. "Thomas, did you see? And then she was kissing him. She didn't think, didn't plan. She just closed the distance between them and pressed her lips against his. For a frozen second, Thomas didn't move. Clara realized what she had done. Kissing her doctor in the middle of the physical therapy room with Andrea watching, and she started to pull away, mortified. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." Andrea, with the wisdom of a seasoned professional, suddenly announced, "I think I hear a nurse calling for me," and swiftly exited the room. Then Thomas's hand was on the back of her neck, pulling her back, and he kissed her for real. It was different from her impulsive kiss. It was deliberate, deep, charged with 2 weeks of unresolved tension. His lips moved against hers with devastating gentleness, as if she were precious, as if he had been waiting for this as much as she had. When they finally separated, both were breathless. They were alone. Thomas rested his forehead against hers, his eyes still closed, his breathing ragged. "Clara." "Don't apologize," she whispered. "Please don't say it was a mistake." He opened his eyes, and what she saw there utterly defeated her. Raw desire mixed with tenderness, wanting mixed with fear. "It wasn't a mistake. It was inevitable." He brushed his thumb across her lower lip. "But you are still my patient. And I can't." His pager beeped. It always beeped. He cursed softly, checking the message, and Clara saw the frustration in every line of his body. "I have to go." "But Clara..." He kissed her again, quick, desperate. "This isn't over. When you are discharged, when you are no longer my patient." He didn't finish the sentence, but the promise hung suspended in the air between them, and Clara stood there, her legs trembling, not from weakness, but from the adrenaline of finally touching the man who had saved her in more ways than just surgically. "You are cleared for discharge." Dr. Chen, the resident, smiled as he handed over the paperwork. 3 weeks, 21 days in this hospital. Clara should have been euphoric, but as she packed her few belongings, Thomas's blue dress, the sketchbook, the flowers Sophie had brought, all she felt was terror, because leaving meant leaving Thomas. It meant returning to a world where she was just Clara Monroe, an unemployed architect recently let go, courtesy of Jason, who worked at the same firm and made her continued presence uncomfortable, temporarily living with Sophie. Here, with Thomas, she was important, seen, loved perhaps. "Ready?" Sophie appeared at the door to pick her up, but Clara wasn't ready at all. They were walking through the hospital lobby when a familiar voice froze Clara in place. "Clara, wait up!" She turned slowly, and there he was. Jason. He looked exactly the same. Perfectly styled hair, expensive suit, that charming smile that used to melt her heart. Now it only made her stomach churn. "What do you want?" Her voice came out colder than she intended. Jason approached, ignoring Sophie, who glared daggers at him. "I came to pick you up, obviously. Now that you're recovered, I thought..." "You thought what?" Clara interrupted, the anger finally overcoming the shock. "That you could just show up after 3 weeks? You left me, Jason. You left me bleeding in that car without looking back." I was in shock. He tried to argue, reaching for her arm. "Clara, I'm sorry. I messed up. But we can fix this. Let me take you home." "She already has a ride." The voice came from behind them. Thomas was there, still in scrubs, as if he had run straight from the operating room. His eyes were fixed on Jason with an intensity that would make lesser men retreat. "Who the heck are you?" Jason demanded, but there was a current of recognition and fear in his voice. Thomas moved to stand beside Clara, not touching her, but close enough for her to feel his warmth. "I am the surgeon who saved her life. The surgeon who was by her side every day while you were..." "Where were you?" "Oh yes. Nowhere." His voice was sharp as a scalpel. Jason flushed crimson. "Look, I don't know what right you think you have." "I have the right she gave me," Thomas cut in. Then he finally looked at Clara. "If you want to go with him, I understand. But if you want another option..." He extended his hand. A choice. A chance. Clara looked between the two men. Jason, 3 years of history, of habit, of mediocre security. Thomas, 3 weeks of intensity, of being seen, of finally feeling alive. It wasn't really a choice. She took Thomas's hand. "I'm going with you." The relief on Thomas's face was devastating, but Jason wouldn't accept defeat easily. "Clara, you're making a mistake. You think he actually cares? He's a doctor. He probably does this with all his patients." Thomas turned so fast that Jason recoiled. "Finish that sentence. and I guarantee you'll need my maxillofacial colleague." His voice was low, dangerous. Clara is not all his patience. She is everything. The silence that followed was charged. Then Sophie, the blessing that she was, broke the tension. "Great. Then it's settled. Clara goes with the hot doctor. Jason, you can leave. Bye now." She practically shoved Jason toward the exit. He left, but not without shooting a final look at Clara, a mix of anger and regret. When he was finally gone, Clara let out a sigh she seemed to have been holding for years. "Thank you," she whispered to Thomas. He intertwined his fingers with hers. "Always." But then he hesitated. "Clara, I need to confess something. I requested a department transfer. As of today, I am no longer your doctor, because—" He gathered his courage. "Because I want permission to do this." And he kissed her right there, in the hospital lobby, without caring who was watching. Because she was no longer his patient. She was simply the woman he was falling in love with. "I have nothing to wear." Clara was in a panic in Sophie's guest room, clothes strewn across the bed. Thomas had called that morning with that voice that made butterflies explode in her stomach. Dinner, tonight. A real date. Not in a hospital. Now, 5 hours later, Clara realized she had spent 3 years with Jason wearing clothes he approved of. Neutral colors, conservative cuts. Nothing that drew too much attention. Nothing that was truly her. "You need to calm down," Sophie said, already rummaging through her own closet. "The man has seen you in a hospital gown. Anything is an improvement." But Clara didn't want anything. She wanted more. She wanted to feel beautiful. For the first time in years, she wanted it for herself, not to please someone else. The doorbell rang precisely at 7. Clara opened the door and forgot how to breathe. Thomas was in a suit. Not the clinical doctor's suit, but something softer, navy blue, open collar. He was holding a box. "For you," he said, handing it to her. Inside was a dress, crimson red, simple but stunning, exactly her style. "Thomas, how did you—" "I pay attention," he replied simply. "I saw the fashion sketches in your notebook, tucked between the architectural drawings. You like vibrant colors, clean cuts, something that makes a statement. So—" He smiled, almost shyly. "I hope I got it right." 20 minutes later, Clara descended the stairs in the crimson dress, and Thomas stopped breathing. "My word," he whispered. He couldn't tear his eyes away. You are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen." The dinner was at a small French restaurant with candles and soft music, but Clara could barely focus on the perfect food because she couldn't stop looking at Thomas. At the way he listened to her, truly listened, when she spoke about her dream of opening her own architectural firm. At the way his eyes lit up when she asked him questions about cardiothoracic surgery, genuinely interested in his world. "Why medicine?" she asked. Thomas grew quiet for a moment, swirling his wine glass. "My younger brother, Daniel. He was 12 when he was diagnosed with a congenital heart defect. I was 15 and felt completely helpless." His voice lowered. "The doctors said there was nothing they could do. But one surgeon, Dr. Richardson, he didn't give up. He operated on Daniel in an experimental 8-hour surgery, and he saved his life." Thomas met her eyes. "I knew that day what I wanted to be. I wanted to be the person who doesn't give up, who fights until the last second." Clara felt tears burning. "Is Daniel okay now?" Thomas smiled, a genuine, joyful smile. Married, 2 kids, working as a teacher. Living a completely normal life thanks to Dr. Richardson. He took her hand across the table. "So, I do what I do because I know what it's like to almost lose someone you love. And when I saw you on that stretcher," he squeezed her hand, "I wasn't going to let you go." After dinner, Thomas took Clara for a walk along the river. The city lights reflected on the water. but all Clara saw was the man beside her. "I need to ask you something." Thomas stopped, turning to face her. "And I need you to be honest with me." Clara's heart raced. "What? Is this too fast? Too intense? Because I feel—" He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with himself. "Clara, I know we've only known each other for 3 weeks. I know you just got out of a bad relationship, and I don't want to pressure you, but I need you to know." He held her face between his hands. "I am falling in love with you. It's not just attraction. It's not just because I was your doctor. It's you. The way you laugh, the way you draw, the way you fight. I am completely, irrevocably falling in love with you. And if that scares you, if you need time, I will wait. But you needed to know." The silence that followed was charged with electricity. Clara looked into those sincere green eyes and realized she was falling in love too. Perhaps she already had. "Kiss me," she whispered. And Thomas obeyed. It was a different kiss from the others, not urgent, not desperate, but deep and true. A promise. When they separated, Clara was smiling. "I'm not scared. For the first time in years, I'm not scared of anything." But then Thomas's phone rang. He ignored it. It rang again. He cursed, finally answering. "What?" His face changed. "When?" "I'm coming now." He hung up, looking at Clara with anguish. "It's Daniel. He had a heart attack. I need to go." Clara pushed him gently. "Go, Thomas. Your family needs you." He hesitated, then kissed her quickly. "I'll call." And he ran, leaving Clara alone by the river, the taste of him still on her lips, and a cold fear beginning to settle in. What if something happened to Daniel? What if she lost Thomas before she truly had him? 2 days. Clara hadn't heard from Thomas for 2 entire days. She understood. He was with his brother, a family emergency. She didn't want to call, afraid of seeming clingy or desperate, the kind of woman who couldn't handle 2 days apart. But the silence allowed old fears to creep back in. "He's going to leave you too," a voice whispered in her head. "He realized you're too much trouble, too broken, not worth the effort." Sophie tried to reassure her, but Clara could barely eat, barely sleep. Then, on Tuesday evening, the doorbell rang. Clara opened the door, and there stood Thomas, dark circles under his eyes, unshaven, exhaustion etched into every line of his body. But he was smiling. "Daniel is going to be okay. It was a scare, but he'll make a full recovery." And then he was hugging Clara, holding her tight as if she were his lifeline. "I missed you so much," he murmured against her hair. They talked for hours that night. Thomas recounted the fear he felt, the memory of almost losing Daniel as a child resurfacing. "It made me realize something," he said, holding her hands. "Life is fragile. Time is precious. And I don't want to waste a single second of what I have with you." Clara felt her heart race. "What are you saying?" Thomas took a breath. "I know it's fast. I know everyone will say we're rushing. But Clara—" He knelt right there on Sophie's sofa cushion and pulled a small box from his pocket. Clara gasped. "Thomas!" "I don't have an elaborate speech," he admitted, opening the box to reveal a delicate ring with a stunning aqua-green stone. "I didn't have time to plan something perfect, but I know, with every fiber of my being, that I want to spend my life with you. I want to wake up next to you. I want to see your projects come to life. I want to build a home with you." Tears welled up in his eyes. "Clara Monroe, will you marry me?" Clara was crying so hard she could barely speak. 3 weeks ago, she was in a slowly destructive relationship with a man who would never choose her. Now, kneeling before her was a man who had literally saved her life and was offering her his future. It wasn't too fast, not when it felt so absolutely right. "Yes," she whispered through her tears. Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes. Thomas slid the ring onto her finger with trembling hands, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her with an intensity that stole all the air. When they finally separated, both were laughing and crying. My mother is going to kill me for not planning this better, Thomas admitted. But the moment Daniel was in that hospital bed, all I could think was that I hadn't told you how much you mean to me, that I might lose my chance. Clara held his face. You'll never lose me, I promise. In the following weeks, everything became a happy whirlwind. Clara met Thomas's family, Daniel, who hugged her and whispered, "Thank you for making my brother happy again," and his parents, who instantly welcomed her. Thomas met Sophie, who approved but warned him, "If you hurt her, I know people." They began planning a small, intimate wedding, but Thomas had a surprise. On Friday, 3 weeks after the proposal, he blindfolded Clara. "Thomas, what are you doing?" She was laughing, confident but curious. "You'll see, trust me." He guided her into the car, driving for 20 minutes. When they finally stopped and he removed the blindfold, Clara saw a house, a white house, with large windows, and in the front, a garden beginning to be planted. "Thomas," her voice failed her. "What?" "You drew your dreams for me," he said softly, walking her toward the front door, which was painted sky blue, exactly as in the drawing. "So I built them." He opened the door. Clara couldn't move. She was frozen in the doorway, staring into the interior of the house, which was perfect. Every detail she had sketched in that hospital notebook was there. The great room flooded with natural light through enormous windows, the kitchen with a central island, the wooden staircase leading upstairs. "How could you?" She could barely form the words. Thomas guided her gently inside, his hand firm on her lower back. "Remember when I asked to keep your drawing? I took it to an architect friend. We worked together to bring your dream to life. This is our home, Clara. Ours." He led her through every room, the studio on the second floor with perfect lighting where Clara could work, the master bedroom with the bay window she had drawn, overlooking the garden. "The rose bushes arrive next week," Thomas explained as they stood on the porch, looking out at the empty garden. "I ordered 15 different kinds. Red, pink, yellow, white. I thought your mother would like to see you surrounded by beauty." Clara was openly weeping now. "I don't deserve you." Thomas turned her to face him, firm but gentle. "Wrong. You deserve this and so much more. You deserve to be loved completely, to be chosen every day, to see your dreams come true." He wiped her tears. "And I am going to spend the rest of my life showing you how much you deserve to be happy." Months later, it was their wedding day. It was a small ceremony in the garden of their house, now lush with roses in full bloom. Clara wore a simple, beautiful dress, walking barefoot on the grass toward Thomas, who stood under an arch covered in flowers. Sophie was the maid of honor, Daniel the best man. Thomas's parents were crying tears of joy. When Clara reached Thomas, he had tears in his eyes. "You are the most beautiful sight I've ever seen," he whispered. The officiant began the ceremony, but Clara barely heard. She was lost in Thomas's eyes, the man who had saved her in more ways than just surgically, the man who had taught her she deserved true love, the man who had literally built her dreams into a home. "I do," she said when her turn came, her voice firm and clear. "Thomas, you found me when I was broken and taught me how to heal. You saw potential when I only saw failure. You loved me when I didn't even know how to love myself. I promise to spend my life loving you with the same intensity that you love me." "I do," Thomas echoed. "Clara, from the moment I saw you, I knew you would change my life. I just didn't know how much. You taught me that saving lives isn't just about surgery. It's about being present, about truly seeing people, about loving without fear. I promise to be your anchor, your biggest supporter, your home forever." As they kissed as husband and wife, the rose garden around them exploded in fragrance. It was perfect. It was real. It was theirs. The reception was intimate, dancing on the terrace as the sun set, laughter and stories shared with the few friends and family present. But the best part came when everyone left, and Clara and Thomas were finally alone in their house. Thomas picked her up in his arms, making her laugh. "Welcome home, Mrs. Parrington." "Mrs. Parrington," Clara repeated, testing the sound. "I like that." He carried her over the threshold, kissing her softly as he set her back down. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "Forever." "Forever," Clara promised back. And for the first time in her life, Clara Monroe, now Parrington, knew exactly what it meant to be chosen, to be loved, to be seen. She was home, not just in the physical house with its rose bushes and light-filled windows, but home in the arms of the man who saved her life and gave her a reason to live fully. 6 months later, Clara was in her studio, working on a new project, a community center with a therapeutic garden. Thomas walked in with 2 coffees, kissing the top of her head. "How's it going?" "Well," she smiled, "I'm drawing rose bushes in the garden." He laughed, hugging her from behind. "Of course you are." And as she looked through the studio window at the garden below, full of roses of every color, blooming under the sun, Clara thought about how life can change in an instant, how an accident can lead to a miracle, how being left at a hospital can lead to finding true love. She thought of Jason, and for the first time, she felt gratitude, because if he hadn't left her, she never would have found Thomas. She never would have learned that she deserved better. She never would have discovered that true love doesn't hurt. It heals. Thomas felt her relax in his arms. "What are you thinking about?" "How lucky I am," she whispered. "How you saved my life in more ways than one." He turned her in his arms, those green eyes she loved so much fixed on hers. "No, my love. You saved mine. You showed me that there is life beyond surgery, that there is beauty, love, home. You completed me." And there, in the sun-drenched studio, surrounded by the scent of roses drifting through the window, they kissed, a renewed promise, a love that began in a hospital and blossomed into a home, a forever that had just begun. 1 year later, Clara barely made it to the bathroom before vomiting. It was the 3rd morning in a row. She clung to the edge of the sink, the world spinning, the bitter taste burning her throat. Through the fog of nausea, a single word pulsed in her mind. Impossible. But her body was screaming a different truth. Thomas's footsteps pounded up the stairs. The door flew open. "Clara?" His voice was laced with panic. "Love, what's happening?" He found her on the bathroom floor, trembling, pale as a sheet. In a second he was beside her, surgeon's hands checking her temperature, pulse, pupils. Then his eyes met hers, and Clara saw the exact moment the possibility crossed his mind. "When was your last period?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Clara tried to mentally calculate, but the last month had flown by so quickly, working on the community center project, tending the rose bushes, living her perfectly happy life. I don't know. 6 weeks? Maybe 7. Thomas didn't say a word. He simply stood up and left the bathroom. Clara heard drawers being opened frantically. He returned seconds later holding a pregnancy test. "You have those here?" Clara couldn't help a weak laugh despite the nausea. Thomas had the decency to look embarrassed. "I bought 3 boxes last month, just in case." He placed the test in her hands with such reverence it could have been gold. "Take the test. Please. I need to know if we are—" He trailed off, unable to finish. 3 minutes. Thomas's cell phone timer marked every second as the test lay face down on the counter. Clara sat on the edge of the tub, watching her husband pace the small space. He was running his hands through his hair repeatedly, the gesture she had learned to recognize as absolute nervousness. "Thomas, you're going to wear a hole in the floor." "Sorry." He stopped, but his fingers drummed against his thigh. "It's just that if you're pregnant, Clara, we're going to be parents. We're going to have a baby." The timer chimed. The sound pierced the silence like a gunshot. Neither of them moved. Then Clara reached out, her fingers trembling so violently she almost dropped the test. She flipped it over. 2 pink lines, clear as the morning sun, unequivocal. "I'm pregnant." Her voice was an incredulous whisper. "Thomas, we're..." The sentence died because Thomas pulled her into his arms so tightly it stole her breath, and he was laughing and crying simultaneously. "We're having a baby! Clara, my God, we're having a baby!" He pulled back just enough to hold her face between his hands, kissing her with an intensity that made the world disappear. "You are going to be the most incredible mother. And you are going to be the most overprotective father in history." Thomas laughed through his tears. "Absolutely. You are not climbing stairs alone anymore. And we need to start prenatal vitamins immediately. And we're seeing the best obstetrician I know tomorrow morning. And..." Clara silenced him with a kiss. "We have 9 months, love." But even as she said it, her hand instinctively went to her still flat belly. 9 months, until she held their baby. The months passed like frames from a movie, doctor appointments where they heard the heartbeat for the first time, and Thomas cried more than Clara, nights where he had serious conversations with her belly about behavior rules, mornings where he prepared every food she could keep down. In the 7th month, Clara woke up at 3 in the morning with pain. It wasn't normal. It was sharp, frightening. Thomas, wake up!" There was real panic in her voice. He was instantly alert. "The baby? It hurts, and I'm bleeding." In 15 minutes they were at the hospital, the same one where they met. But now Clara was the patient in premature labor, and Thomas was the terrified husband gripping her hand so hard her bones ached. "It's okay," the obstetrician said with clinical calm. "We're going to stop the contractions." But Thomas wasn't listening. His face was buried in Clara's neck, and she felt warm tears against her skin. "I can't lose you. I can't lose both of you." "Both?" Clara held her breath. "Thomas, we don't know the sex yet." He lifted his head, tears shining in his green eyes. "The doctor told me when you were sleeping yesterday. I needed to know she was okay." His hand went to Clara's belly. "It's a girl, love. Our daughter." 3 days of rest and medication stopped the labor. When they returned home, Thomas carried her upstairs despite her protests. "Thomas, I can walk." "Not on my watch." He deposited her on the sofa as if she were made of glass. "Now you rest. And our Rose." "Rose?" Clara repeated, her heart swelling. Thomas knelt beside her. "Rose Monroe Parrington, for your mother, for this garden where our story began, if you want." The tears came. They seemed to be all Clara did lately. "I want to. I want that very much." 2 weeks later, at 3 in the morning, Clara was in the kitchen when she felt it. A pop. Warm liquid. Her water broke. "Thomas!" 12 hours of labor. 12 hours of pain that redefined the meaning of the word, of Thomas whispering encouragement, of Clara squeezing his hand so hard she was sure she broke it. "You can do it," he repeated endlessly. "One more push, love. Just one more." And then, the most beautiful sound in the universe. A cry. Sharp, furious, perfectly healthy. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, but Clara barely heard over Thomas sobbing beside her. He was openly weeping as they watched the baby being cleaned. "Is she okay?" "Perfect. 7 pounds, 8 ounces of perfection." And then they placed Rose in Clara's arms, for the very first time. Her tiny, red, squashed face, her eyes squeezed shut, her mouth crying. "Hi, Rose," Clara whispered. "Mommy waited so long to meet you." Thomas was bent over both of them, gently touching Rose's face. "She's perfect, Clara. We did this. She's perfect." Rose stopped crying at the sound of his voice. Her eyes opened, just a slit, and she looked directly at her father. "She knows you," Clara whispered. "She knows Daddy's voice." Thomas kissed the top of Rose's head, then Clara's lips. "Thank you for her, for making my life complete." That was today's story. It's amazing how true love has the power to heal old wounds, and how the right person shows us that real love is gentle, healthy, and brings peace to the heart. If this story touched you in any way, don't forget to give it a like. That way, YouTube knows you enjoy this kind of content and keeps recommending stories like this to you. Thank you for listening all the way through, and I'll see you in the next story.